Welcome to the Confident Brushstrokes podcast with your host, Stephanie Paige Thompson. Stephanie is a young but internationally celebrated representational artist. On this podcast, Stephanie will interview other living master artists as well as answer questions from representational artists around the globe. We'll share practical insights to help you create with more clarity, conviction, and joy. Let's get into it. Welcome to episode 6 of the Confident Brushstrokes podcast. I'm your co-host, Adam Eek, and joined by Stephanie Paige Thompson. In this episode, we're planning on doing a great debrief of the Portrait Society of America Art of the Portrait conference that was held a couple weeks ago in Atlanta. And I think a lot of the audience is excited to hear how you performed during the face-off, as well as your breakout session with your dear beloved friend, Michelle Dunaway, and just your overall impressions and the connections that you've made throughout the years and how valuable this conference truly is. So before we dive in head first, it's springtime and I'm excited to see what you're working on in the studio. Are you thinking about some plein air work? Why don't you update the audience about the plans that we have also for your studio space too?
100%. Thanks, hon. I actually plein air painted today. Our neighbor has a magnolia tree that is one of my favorite springtime flowers is the blooms, magnolia blooms. And they have a tree planted right on the line of our property. So I don't have to trespass too much in order to go and paint it. So today was the day. There's always a little bit of a mental hurdle for me personally when I go plein air painting for the first time in the season. I know a lot of painters go and plein air paint throughout the winter. I did not do that this winter season. So this was my first time taking an easel outside to plein air paint. And it's almost for me sometimes as if the same mental hurdle it takes to do a workout. You know, you're going to be so grateful that you did the workout. You're going to enjoy it even as soon as you get there and start feeling great and moving your body. But getting to the point of being in the gym and starting to do the movements can feel really substantial, like there's a substantial hurdle to cross. And so I went through that hoopla mentally for a little bit and then got out, and it was so wonderful to be out there painting those magnolias. So I think that's the start of quite a bit of plein air for me this summer, especially because my studio space is going to be under construction. So for a little bit of context for you, the space that I have been using as a studio that we have also been using for broadcasting brushers is a small L-shaped portion of our basement. So our basement, the builder that built it, there's quite a large footprint to the basement, but they only finished about a 400 square foot portion of it in an L shape. So there's quite a bit of space, but because it's in that L, it's sort of broken up a bit. So 2 small spaces, and they've been working wonderfully for the last almost 3 years. I did have a studio above ground for the first year and a half that we lived here. And then I just realized that though there's natural light, there's so much distraction above ground for me with duties and, you know, packages coming to the door. I can hear the laundry going or not going and it needs to be going. You know, there's just a lot of you work from home. I can hear your calls and vice versa. You can hear me in the studio. So when I moved to the basement, I realized this is just the perfect spot for me because it is very enclosed. It's very private. There's no one walking through. That was always a big thing. No one can walk behind me in the studio, which was constantly happening upstairs. And it just, for some reason, really threw me off. So we are going to be finishing the large unfinished portion that we have in the basement. And it will be the largest studio that I have ever had, which I am so excited for. There's a lot of lights that are going in. They're all on dimmers, so we're going to be able to control the lighting in a way we've never done before. It's going to really revolutionize what we can even do with broadcasting brushers, and I am so looking forward to it. So while that's happening this summer, I will probably be doing a lot more plein air since the space that is my studio now is going to be very much adjacent to all of the construction. So I probably will also set up a little makeshift studio in an upstairs area of our house that is available. It's not ideal, but it is. I've been scrappy with my studio spaces for a long time. So plein air with a makeshift studio above ground, I think, is going to be the move for summer 2026.
The finishing out of the basement is a realization of a dream that we've had ever since we really started to think about broadcasting brushers and how we could scale this passion project of ours. So for listeners who aren't a part of broadcasting brushers, one of the constraints that we've been dealing with as we host live models and live stream Stephanie painting them, and also provide another live stream for artists around the world to paint from, is that the space has been quite cramped. And also the experience for the model hasn't been ideal. So we often ask models to come with multiple different outfits, and right now it's just not ideal for them to think about changing and getting posed properly, as well as constraints with lighting. And for me capturing footage, we just felt very cramped, and we really needed a strong proof of concept before we could think about investing into the expansion. So as we think about what's in it for you, for the broadcasting brushers, we do have the expectation that the production value should ramp up. And then you guys will also be the beneficiaries, I think, of the model having a better experience as well. And that's really important to us as we ask models. And one of the blessings of the Broadcasting Brushers project is that over 50% of the time, the models will typically donate their fee back to us to invest more and more into the project. To us, that tells us that we should really be providing an incredible experience for them too. So as we think about what are the benefits here, we've clearly listed them out. It's going to be a significant investment, but we are so excited about this. You're going to have over 1,000 square feet for your studio space. And who knows?
Unheard of.
Who knows? One-on-one mentoring. There's a world of possibility that's going to open up, and we are very excited about that.
Yep. Ask us next week when the construction has started how we're feeling, and maybe this rosy outlook will be a little. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's gonna be great.
Send up a couple prayers for our 2-year-old son whose nap time is definitely going to be invaded upon as well.
Yeah.
But let's go ahead and get into the meat of the discussion, which is the Portrait Society Conference 2026. I think this was a really incredible year for you for so many different reasons, but let's just walk through the order of events at the conference. So my understanding is that you arrived on Wednesday, the night before the conference. This was really important for you, especially being in the face-off. We wanted to make sure you had time to settle in. But if I remember correctly, you and your mother were having dinner at a restaurant in the hotel. And who did you come across there at the restaurant?
Yes. We were there Wednesday night, and I'll explain a little bit more why, but Rose Franson was there in the hotel. And I just seen Rose about a month ago in Scottsdale at the workshop that I took with her. And I've known her now for 10 years, right? Because this is the 10th year that I have gone to Portrait Society. So sort of an anniversary, a personal anniversary for me. And if you're not familiar with the Portrait Society, it is the largest gathering of master artists, intermediate and beginner artists interested in portraiture and figurative work, or just painting excellently, that I know of in the world, where all of these artists join together for a weekend, Thursday through Sunday, usually in the spring, April or May. And there's lectures, there's demos, there's access to all of these artists that otherwise you would have to travel to all 50 states, other countries to get access to. And then it is combined with the International Portrait Competition that the Portrait Society puts on. So the finalists, there were 19 of them this year. The finalist pieces are all there in person. So not only is it a really amazing opportunity to talk to and connect with artists, master artists, beginner artists, vendors. There's amazing vendors there, all the big ones and the small ones that you can think of. They're in person to check out their product, meet the people, talk about it. It's literally like Disney World for artists. So I first went 10 years ago, and when I was there, and that the premier event of the conference is Thursday night. Things really get started on Friday at 9 a.m., and then they don't stop until Sunday at about 1. But Thursday from 4:30 to 7:30 is this event called the Face Off. And it is artists that are on faculty, and faculty artists are teaching at the conference. Many of them are finalists. They are there demoing, doing lots of different lectures and things, the artists that are on faculty are all painting. So there'll be 3 artists to a model in this large room with about probably 6 or 7 models. So we have a huge room, all of these master artists painting. And I remember 10 years ago walking into that room and seeing all of these artists that I had been following in magazines and on Instagram and Facebook, and they were right there, and I could watch their process, and I could see what they were painting and then how they were interpreting it. That is a big learning. That was a big learning moment for me, because you can see master paintings in galleries, in museums, but to see actually what they are seeing and how they're translating it is a huge step up, or a leg up, so to speak, for learning, because you then get to see the direct choices that they're making and also see how you see it differently, right? And how maybe what you're seeing is not as sophisticated as what they're seeing, or how your color sense is different, etc. There's so many benefits to it. So I walked in that room and I saw these artists painting and drawing and sculpting, and that weekend, as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, knew that I one day wanted to be good enough as an artist to be asked to be in the face-off. And that happened 10 years later. So this was my 10th year, and they invited me, the Portrait Society invited me last year to join as a faculty artist this year and paint in the face-off, which personally is a significant goal reached, right? Because of the quiet promise I made to myself in 2016. And the whole weekend, it was almost as if I was dancing around it. I'm sitting there and I'm just thinking, I want to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. I cannot do that, and I want to be able to do that. And then Friday comes, and there's all these more demos, and they're talking, and I see these other artists. I remember distinctly Dan Gerhardt's was demoing. Kwang Ho was talking about his philosophy towards painting, and I was sitting in those lectures and just thinking, if they can do it, I can do it. Still not really just feeling like I could be confident enough or believe in myself enough, or a little scared to commit to all the work I knew it was going to be to say, I want to do this. And by the time we got to Saturday night, which is the banquet when the winner of the International Portrait Competition is announced, the Draper Grand Prize winner, they actually just renamed the award to the Roerich Grand Prize winner. But I remember that it was Michael Klein that won that year, and I saw Michael this year, which was really special. I just really admire Michael in a lot of ways. And I watched him go up there and win that award, and I literally was sitting there, and that was the moment. So maybe it wasn't the exact moment of the face-off, but it was born in the face-off, and said to myself, I need to do this. I want to do it. I need to.
Yeah, and I think for the audience, we want to break down your experience at this year's face-off and also talk about your breakout session first, but let's chronologically think about the conversation Wednesday night that you were able to see Rose, who you just had a workshop with. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you don't need to delve into the contents of the conversation itself, but I think this is a really great example of highlighting the power of this conference and being able to network and surround yourself with other artists. Can you talk a little bit more about that for the audience?
100%. This is something that anyone can go to if you book a ticket and go. And that's what I have done over the last 10 years. I've made it to 8 out of the last 10. And so 8 out of the last 10 years, I have made a point to go and see Rose Franson face to face. I admire her so greatly. She's just one example, because we're talking about this conversation we had on Wednesday night after a day of travel, being in the hotel. And, that's more time than you spend with some people that are maybe even family members, right? Time passes very quickly, and I have been grateful for the work and the money that I've invested over the last 10 years to have this recurring relationship with Rose, where I'm constantly being put back in front of her and all these other artists and vendors and all of these other people as well, but Rose in particular. And then this workshop I took with her this last in February, it just is all this shared experience, and we're friends now. It was so exciting to me when she walked up, and it was like 45 minutes that we were just talking, some of it about painting and some of it just about just catching up. And it was sort of, it was just so special to me in a way of just thinking, okay, when I remember 10 years ago when I was here, I was, standing in line, chasing her down and just thinking, what could I possibly say to this woman that, she doesn't need me to meet her, right? I just want to meet her, and I want to get some little bit of her understanding inside of me, and then it just shifted away from that, puppy dog, please give me attention. Like, I want to meet you. Please take a picture with me, to this relationship. And I still just want a nugget of her wisdom inside of my brain. But it was just a neat sort of switch. So, yeah, we flew in on Wednesday because Thursday at 4:30 is when the face-off starts. And it is a 3-hour. I'm going to move to Thursday. Does that work for you?
Yeah. So let's just double click on this point before we move forward. And I think of like my vocation, almost every vocation has conferences, and inevitably there is like this Super Bowl conference, the premier conference where there's this convergence of everyone that's coming. We think of art materials providers, we think of master artists, we think of aspiring artists, the next generation of artists who are coming up and rising quickly through the ranks. And I think it's really important to, as long as you're not dealing with real constraints, to make the effort to go. And I think your experience this year has made us prioritize this conference even more. And that's the push for the audience is, in one place, it's hard to derive so much value like the Portrait Society of America conference. And we'll talk more about you being on faculty and some of the things that you're doing to help other artists as well, like portfolio critiques. But I think one of the key takeaways that we want from this podcast specifically is this is the Super Bowl conference for representational artists who are focused on portraiture, who are focused on figurative work as well. So let's go ahead and switch gears. The face-off arguably was the most exciting thing for you this year. As you mentioned earlier, Stephanie, this was like the culmination of a lot of hard work. And I was talking to my parents about this, how excited we were for you. And it was like this full circle moment. Even when I had met you over 5 years ago, you had talked about this conference and your goals, and almost a watershed moment to think about you being in this face-off. But there are a couple things that I want to tease out that I think are really interesting. Number one, just the company of artists that you were in painting alongside was absolutely incredible. Let's go ahead and start with the two artists that you were right next to in terms of the trio and the model that you had. So tell the audience who you were painting with. And one of the things that we've heard from a couple of friends was, oh my goodness, you must have been so nervous painting alongside these two titans. But tell the audience who, and then give us an idea of your mindset when you were painting.
Sure, for sure. So in the face-off, I show up and you don't get to choose where you stand, what position. There's 3 per, so it's usually 3/4 straight on, 3/4, or profile 3/4 profile. It's just kind of depends on how you have the model. You don't get to choose the model, so you don't get to choose who you could paint next to. So it is all out of your hands, and then you're going to paint for 3 hours in this position. So I literally just prayed before going into this. I won't get into that quite yet because that's the second part of your question, but I prayed that. And I didn't even pray for a specific type of model or anything. I just prayed that I would be equipped to paint the model very well, whoever it was. And I did pray that it would be not, a very washed out situation where the background is cream and we have a very fair skinned model with a cream dress. That would just be extremely difficult to get the nuances in only 3 hours. So I did pray for a bit of contrast, and I show up and this model is unbelievable. So nice. His name is Littleton Alston, and he's a sculptor, and he was just iconic. And I got to pose the position right in the middle. So they just went from 1 to however many artists were in the face-off, and I cannot remember. And I apologize. I think it's around 12. Okay. But I got position number 2. So one was, the 3/4 view, the profile view, and then I was right in the middle, and I just was so thrilled. And I looked to my left, and it's Zhao Mingwu, who is an unbelievable painter. And now also I can attest to him being just the most classy gentleman, one of the classiest I've ever met. So kind, so unassuming. You would not know that he was who he was. And we were setting up the model together because our third person hadn't arrived yet. And we were working together with the lighting. There were things that he wanted changed. And so I was deferring to him very much, because I was so grateful for the model that I got, in my position. I just thought, I'm not going to be pushy here. But he was also very, very open to hearing my thoughts as well. He was not making any unilateral decisions. So right from the start, it was just going so well. It was so fun. And I also just thought, I have done this so many times. This is no different than any of the other sessions I have done, except for there are going to be more people watching. And I can handle that. I've done this a lot of times. So I was feeling very comfortable with my position and who was next to. And then our third artist shows up. And this is when I just felt like everything clicked and locked in, so to speak, where it just felt like, okay, here's our roller coaster. Here's our crew of people that are going to be riding it together, and let's go. And I love roller coasters now, and it was Jeff Hine. So I first met Jeff Hine 10 years ago, and he looked at my portfolio. He looked at my sketchbook, and he said a few very positive things. He gave me lots of constructive criticism, but he was very, very helpful because at that point I was trying to figure out what school I should go to. And he really, just with a couple of statements and looking at my work, helped to put me on the path that I went down, which was the path of workshops, and has been such a champion of mine for years. I mean, he had me on his podcast in like the first 20 episodes or something. This was now almost 3.5, 4 years ago, and has just been a very supportive person. He's a master, and I've always been just shocked by how proud he has seemed of me, honestly. And if something was to happen to me, we weren't traveling together, and Adam and I were not traveling together. My mother came along as a companion and helper to help. I think we're tentatively planning on us all going next year, and it was sort of like, oh, why didn't we plan that for this year? But anyway, if something were happening to me, and I needed to go to the hospital, and it was 2 a.m. at the conference, I would and feel confident that I could call Jeff Hine and say, I need someone to take me to the hospital, and he would not even bat an eye, and he would just be there. So just a very good friend and supporter. And so when he showed up, and this is what was funny to me, getting into the second part of your question, when getting home, a couple of friends of mine were saying, oh my gosh, when I saw that you were painting next to Jeff Hine, I just thought, oh, that has to be so stressful for her. All these things. It's Jeff Hine. Someone even said, I would have just wanted to watch them the whole time, take a workshop. And yes, I mean, I did watch what they were doing the entire time because it's so fun. But I literally never had a moment of feeling, oh my gosh, I'm going to be painting next to these two. I felt like I had just this sort of warm hug buffer around me. It was just, there's Zhao Ming. I have never met him before, but I already admire him so greatly as an artist. And now personally, he's just living up far beyond what I could have expected. And then here's Jeff, who I've known for so long, who I know is cheering me on, who I know is going to be unbelievable. It was just very special. So that was all taking place. And as far as, my nerves going into it, you asked that question. All the way leading up to the moment, I kept checking in with myself and saying, am I just delusional, or am I just truly not nervous? Because I kept waiting for that feeling of butterflies and insecurity and nervousness to click in, and it really never did. I never felt insecure about going into the face-off or afraid to do it. It felt like something that I had been preparing for 10 years.
Yeah, and something that I would absolutely not take credit for, but something you are exceptional at, and I've commended you on this, is your ability to rise to the occasion. And one of the things that we had discussed beforehand, before you left, was in the company of the Kwang Ho's, the Jeremy Lipkings of the world.
Who were painting in the face-off.
Right. It would be very easy to feel starstruck, and honestly, potentially even justifiable to feel starstruck. But you have always been able to rise to the occasion. And it's like you said, that you lock in. And that is really important. Our discussion before you had left was, look, these are artists that you've looked up to for a very long time, but make no mistake, these are your peers now. Just the fact that you were invited to the face-off itself, you've already been on faculty for a number of years before this. And even when you did your video series with CW Monday, which again, I can't heap enough praise on CW for so many different reasons, your painting is right on par with his. And he'd say the exact same thing as well. And so when we heard this feedback from friends, it was fun to hear, but I knew you. And even when I was here back home with our son, I was like, she's going to crush this, because she never lets these opportunities pass her by. And she finds the mental state that she needs to make sure that she seizes the moment.
Thanks, hon. I appreciate that. That means a lot to me. And I really do feel, I just felt like it was the right place at the right time, and I was ready for it. And I also was not going to be trying to be a copy of Jeff Hine. I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew what I needed to do in order to get this portrait done in 3 hours. If I had a fear, it was just that I would run out of time, before I could get to making the edges more sophisticated, or struggle to get the likeness and spend the 3 hours just doing that. Whatever it might have been, those were, if I had a fear, it was that. But I wasn't afraid of who I would paint next to, because I knew how I wanted to approach it, which a couple of years ago would not have been the case. I would have just been looking to the right and to the left and copying and being very influenced. So thank you for your kind words. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And talk to the audience a little bit more about how Broadcasting Brushers prepared you for the moment. And as an aside, when we think about Broadcasting Brushers, we offer 2 live streaming sessions a month. And I think the great call out here is that they are 3 hours a piece.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that I ended up actually making the final call that that's how long the sessions would be. And here we have the premiere event of Portrait Society, where they're giving these artists 3 hours to get a likeness.
Yep.
So talk to the audience a little bit more about how Broadcasting Brushers prepared you for the moment where it was an unforeseen benefit.
Right. I didn't expect this 100%, but the face-off was easier than I expected because of the training of Broadcasting Brushers. When I do Broadcasting Brushers, I think it is one of the more difficult ways to paint a portrait, just for the physical and mental energy that it requires, of the contemplation of the setup beforehand, the integrating the model into getting them comfortable beforehand, finding the pose, making sure that the cameras are all right, making sure that I can see, making sure all of these things. And then during the 3 hours, talking the whole time about my process. And I love it. I truly love it. And I don't at the time think, oh, this is the most difficult thing that could ever be done. But I am very, very tired at the end. And I'm very, I do warn the models that my ability to string sentences together after the session finishes is greatly diminished. And I will struggle to come up with certain words, to finish sentences. So when I got to the face-off, they have it all set up so there's chairs behind every single artist, stadium seating almost, and they're filled basically for the entire time. And there's 700 people that came to the conference, so not every single person is in town yet, and some people are not at every event, of course, but there's 500 people milling about this room, sitting, standing, coming up and taking pictures, talking. But it is set up so that each artist doesn't have to be talking while they're painting. They are to be left alone to do their work, and then on the breaks, you're welcome to talk with them. So I was very prepared to be talking to people who were around me, but everyone very much respected it. I was greeting people, friends and attendees that I've known for so long. But I wasn't having to verbalize my thought process. And I felt like I was painting so much faster. And by the end of 2 hours, that I had an entire hour. And there were things to fix, right? And I had a little hurdle at the beginning because the Portrait Society supplies lights for the easel because it's a huge room and the lights are dim so that you can have the lighting on the models, you know, not be just totally obstructed by the overhead lights. And so every artist has a little clip light for their easel. Well, I got my clip light and it was probably around 2000 Kelvin in temperature. So yellow. I mean, so yellow. And it was projecting great light, but it was yellow on my canvas. And so, okay, I can deal with that. Well, then the light on our model was probably, I mean, if it was 6,000, it was 7,000 Kelvin. It was so cold, so cold. So I have this cold light on my model. And I even I went around to all the other different lights that were being used. I pulled a light bulb out of one. They had one light bulb and it said 2,700 Kelvin. And Xiaoming and Jeff both said, well, that would be better because this is just so cool. Well, we put it in and it was as if someone had, turned the light completely off. It was so weak. It had no power. There was no light on his face. So we stuck with the cold light because it was our only option. But I still had this very cool light. So the first 2 sessions were a struggle because I'm very familiar with my palette and I could have done it, but it was making it much more difficult for me to be able to see what was actually happening color-wise on my painting and to mix those cool colors and then see them on my painting a completely different color because of the warm light that was on my easel. And like an angel, I think it was the second break, Michelle Dunaway, my good friend, who was painting across the way from me. We couldn't see each other. You can't really see anybody because it's such a big room. You can just see the people that you're painting with. But she came up and she was like, wow, this is looking amazing. She was very positive and all these things. And she said, oh, wow, that color is so warm. I have an extra easel light. Do you need it? I'm not using it. And I was like, yes, I would absolutely love it. And so she disappeared. And then this very kind woman in Kenya came up and helped me. We had to tape it to the easel because it was, I believe it's an Edge Pro gear light. So in the Edge Pro, it just clips in. But there's no actual clip to it. It's like these metal prongs that go right into the easel if you have an Edge Pro gear, which I don't. And so we're using masking tape to tape this light, you know. So if you see in the pictures on Instagram, this masking tape sort of get up on the back is because I was getting the other light and that I had the cool light. So then I had wonderful light on my painting and it changed the entire experience. And I do believe that was a turning point of just, okay, now I'm not having to fight these hurdles. And now I can kind of sail down the mountain or, you know, I can't think of a phrase right now. Ski, sled, I don't know. It just was a lot easier after I had that light. So that was the one moment where I just thought, okay, this is an unforeseen hurdle, and I'm going, I was pulling my phone out and putting the flashlight on just to see, okay, what the color is actually doing. But it was just more difficult. And so once I got that light, it was much better.
Yeah, it's a blessing in disguise to think about how hardened you are in terms of what we've gone through with broadcasting brushers. The broadcasting brushers themselves who are listening are likely going to laugh because they're like, yeah, we've seen the technical difficulties. We've seen the white balance be a little bit off. The palette camera view has been a little bit off. And you have had to manage the model and also juggle being in front of the audience at the same time while you're thinking about painting. And naturally, I think when you're at the studio and you are not being filmed and you are not being live streamed, it feels easier for you now. And the takeaway there is, I don't know how this translates to artists listening, but it's always going to be do the hard thing.
Right.
And when you practice, simulate these situations to the extent that you can, so that when you're on a bigger stage or when you are painting a high priority commission, it feels easier or it feels more natural. And I think that's exactly where you're at right now when you are going to be painting plein air or when you're going to be painting a commission. We just had a conversation with folks who are thinking about a commission with you today. I think those are going to be easier for you now because of your ability to roll with the punches. So not surprised. This is a new story to me. It didn't even come up about your first 2 sessions being a little bit under duress, but totally not surprised, A, that you were resilient, and B, that Michelle Dunaway came to the rescue, because Michelle is Michelle, mentor, very dear friend, and it's just a really incredible story. Let's go ahead and move forward to your breakout session with Michelle. Before I do that,
really quick, I was so hungry after it finished, as you would be. It was 7:30 when we finished, and I had eaten breakfast at like 11, a big breakfast. And then I had this croissant. It was delicious, ham and cheese croissant. This may be too much detail, but it was amazing. And right before the face-off started at like 4:30. So I am quite hungry. And it was me, Michelle, my mother, and Alicia Ponzio, who is an amazing sculptor. And she sculpted in the face-off. And we were all together. And we said, well, let's just go to the hotel restaurant because that will be fast. We don't have to travel anywhere. We don't have to walk to any restaurants. We'll just go there. So we go and we order. And we wait and wait and wait. And it is 2 hours before we get our food. And I think we could have picked up on the clues of the duress of our waitress when we sat down, but it's not that big of a restaurant. And this is supposedly their sole thing is to give people food, and even when it's very busy, took 2 hours to get this food. So by the time the food came, it was after 10 p.m. and I could have eaten literally cardboard and thought it was unbelievably delicious. But it was it was just funny that happened after all of this. And then I couldn't fall asleep for hours and I had to wake up very early the next day. But at 1:30, I'm just laying in bed, just still so hyped after the experience. And I will say this, I kept saying this, I truly, honestly, serious, was never nervous about the face-off, but as soon as it finished, I was so glad it was over.
Yep.
And it was just because of, I knew I wasn't nervous, but I knew it was going to be a lot of work, and that I just needed to be very focused. And so as soon as it was over, it was like, okay, I can now bring my brain down and my physical presence down a couple notches to a more reasonable, sustainable point, a running level, or what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not sure exactly, but. And
let's sift through this quickly. I think what a strong takeaway here is when you think about the conscious versus the subconscious. So what I mean by that is it's highly likely that subconsciously nerves continue to build as you are traveling to Atlanta the evening before and leading up to the face-off subconsciously and in a natural human state. That is inherently stressful. And if you let those thoughts win, if the subconscious starts to shift to the conscious, that's dangerous. And what I'm seeing is the power of the conscious mind here is saying, hey, I have control over my thoughts. I have control over my mental state. I am strong. I am resilient. I have prepared for this. I deserve to be here. I'm going to now execute. And it's very natural to say, okay, I've expended so much energy and effort here. Wow, that was a lot. And now you can step back and say,
I just need some food. Oh, wait, no, you're not getting it for 2 hours.
And I would have given you probably 48 hours to where you would have said like, oh, I'll do this whole thing all over again. But even still, you're tired and just really, really fun to see you do that. But I think there is something in there to really extract and say, okay, Stephanie consciously knew that she was supposed to be there. And that's how she rises to the occasion. It's not that you're just falling into this and, oh, I escaped the face-off with a wonderful painting and it's not happenstance. And mastering the mental is so important as an artist. We plan on doing an episode on that specifically, but that was there, that happened. And I think that's very powerful. So let's go ahead and move on to Friday morning, excuse me. That was when you had a Broadcasting Brushers breakfast. So I'll speak on this quickly just because I'm conscious of the time. I want you to spend some more time talking about the breakout session with you and Michelle. But one of the things that we went ahead and fostered was a Broadcasting Brushers meet up for breakfast. It was quite early. I think you had about 8 or 9 Broadcasting Brushers there in person. The conversation was rich. This was of crucial importance to us to actually have Stephanie meet some of the Broadcasting Brushers that she's never met before, to understand what their view of the conference was, what they're getting out of it. But most importantly, the community aspect of this has been absolutely incredible to us. We were not prepared for how much we have loved this Broadcasting Brushers community.
And how we love individual Broadcasting Brushers.
Yep.
There were 9 in attendance, 8 or 9. I can't remember exactly. I would have to go through the names. But all of them could come to the breakfast, and it was powerful because some were there for the first time because they'd heard about it from me, and some had been going in the past but had taken a long break and were back. Some I had met previously, but most I hadn't. So it was really special to get to put faces to names that I'd seen in the Discord and their paintings for all of these months painting together, and then just hear a question I asked everybody, and it was fascinating to see what came out of each of the artists, what their goal was. But I asked, what do you hope to get out of the conference? Why did you spend the time and the money to come? And everyone had a different reason. And in answering the question, I got to know them more personally. And it was just a very special time to get to be in person with everyone in this shared experience. And then right at the beginning of the conference, I wanted to do it on Friday morning because it would be right before things really got kicked off, right? The face off is Thursday night, but most people have just traveled in, and a dinner after that is not as powerful, I don't think, as a breakfast right before then you go into this weekend. So I absolutely loved that. Friday, then I did portfolio reviews in the afternoon. Yeah.
And so let's go ahead and talk about your breakout session with Michelle. So I'll set the stage for the audience as best that I can. I'll expect you to correct me where I'm off. But Stephanie has looked up to Michelle as a mentor for many, many years. You've taken multiple workshops with her. Michelle has been instrumental in your career as an artist with your growth and your development, but also a very, very, very dear friendship as well. This was also another full circle moment for you at this conference. She had 2, but talk to the audience about what the premise of the breakout session was, and then also loop in who you both had the privilege to paint, which is incredible in and of itself.
Yes, this is a great topic. The Portrait Society, when they ask people to be on faculty, they also request that you share a little bit of what you're very interested in painting right now, what you're working on in the studio, and from the responses then compile the agenda, the schedule for the year, and find artists and group them together with each other. Oh, both of these artists are interested in painting children. Well, we'd like to have a segment on painting children, so here you go. Or if an individual artist has a direct idea for a breakout session, they welcome that as well. So I had a direct idea pretty quickly when they invited me to give this feedback. And the idea was to capitalize on the power of mentorship, particularly at the Portrait Society as a whole, was my idea, because I first found out about Portrait Society in one of the very first portrait workshop I ever took, which was in the fall of 2015. I took a workshop with Don Whitelaw, in Southern Indiana. And she studied with Everett Raymond Kinsler, who was directly in the line of Sargent. I think his teacher studied with Sargent, an absolute master. And then Dawn Whitelaw has since mentored Michael Shane Neal. She's just a titan in the art world. And so at that conference at that workshop in 2015, she said, you really should try going to the Portrait Society and you could probably get a scholarship. We have a great scholarship program. And I got that scholarship and I got to go to that conference in 2016. And at that conference, I met Michelle Dunaway. And I have not shared this detail of our relationship publicly just because out of respect for privacy, wasn't necessarily something that needed to be shared, but Michelle shared it when we were in the breakout session. And so I met her that first year at the Portrait Society, and we got to go out to dinner after the face-off, which blew my mind. And I was asking her so many questions throughout this dinner. The poor woman had just done the face-off. Now I know what that
how you literally just talked to her. I was beat to a pulp. I was on my last legs, and here you are just rattling off questions to
Poor
Michelle.
Thing. And she even said, she's like, my dinner was absolutely cold by the time I got to finishing it because I was answering so many questions. She had never seen any of my pieces, right? And I don't remember any of the questions I asked, but I had so many for her. And so the next day, it's Friday. This was 10 years ago. We're sitting in the conference, and oh my gosh, Michelle Dunaway walks up and sits right, right next to my mom. It's me and my mom. I was 18 at this time. She was there to make sure that, these artists were upstanding, that this was the thing that I should do, and to understand what I was being taught to help support. Anyway, so Michelle, she leans over and she's chatting with my mom. And I'm just sitting here thinking, starstruck at 18, just like, oh my gosh, I had dinner with Michelle Dunaway and now she is sitting next to us. Oh my gosh, And what are they talking about now? It's a long conversation. My mom was pulling out her phone. Now they're chatting still more. And I think Michael Shane Neal was on the stage. I'm thinking, what are they? They have to be talking about something really important to be missing this. Michelle gets up and leaves. Well, it turns out that she had offered a spot for me in her upcoming workshop the next month in Putney, Vermont, free of charge. She was teaching a workshop on, I believe, rhythms in the figure. And she said, I just want to offer this. I don't know if this is even possible, but I would love to gift Stephanie a spot in my workshop if you can make it, literally within the month. Well, extreme generosity. I could make it. We made everything happen so I could go. I went to that workshop. After the first day of painting in that workshop I got a call from the woman who runs Village Arts of Putney, which is where the Putney painters have been painting for these many decades. And she says, Penelope, we saw your painting from the first day in the workshop, and I showed it to Richard and Nancy, and Richard Schmid would like to invite you to come to the Putney Painters this weekend. It's on Saturday, and the workshop ended on Thursday. Mm-hmm. So I got to meet then Richard Schmid and paint with the Putney Painters and meet Nancy Guzik for the first time and just have this unbelievable experience before it was too late.
Yep.
And it was all connected to this being at the Portrait Society, Dawn having told me about it, being able to get the scholarship, Michelle's generosity. It was just all of these pieces that fell into place to some degree, but I paid with my own money to get to the conference. It was like, it was something that everyone could have gone to, and had a similar, if you're there, you don't know what could happen. So anyway, this was the idea I had for mentorship was, okay, this has been instrumental in my career over the last 10 years. Every year, something like that has happened.
Yeah.
Something like that has happened where maybe it's just one conversation where in the conversation, a question I've been dealing with for months in the studio, agonizing over, is answered.
Yeah.
Or a relationship is made that then changes my life forever, like in the case of Michelle Dunaway. And so that was what I wanted to talk about, because also Dawn has been mentored. Michelle has been mentored.
Yep.
I have been mentored by both of them and others, and the catalyst was Portrait Society. Michelle first met Richard because her painting was a finalist. You know, she met him after she had already been a finalist. So wanted to kind of talk about some of those aspects of mentorship, how it can work, and the power of it. So we were painting Dawn. It was unbelievably special and fun and instrumental. And there is one thing that I want to add on to what I said in there. So an artist in the group asked a great question. It was a completely sold out breakout. Sold out. It's not an extra cost on your tuition, but you select the breakout rooms and they fill up. It was
at capacity, right?
Thank you. It was at capacity many months before even the conference began. It was like literally in the fall that it was at capacity. But this artist asked a question because we were all sharing our individual stories of how we were mentored and how that worked. And for almost everyone, it was that we paid to go to their workshop, you know, and we put ourselves in the right place. Dawn Whitelaw couldn't get into Everett Raymond Kinsler's workshop. And so what she did was mail a check for the full amount of the workshop to the instructor and therefore got a spot. They didn't turn her down, so she made a spot for herself and then continually did that and then built a relationship with him. You know, she put herself in the right place. Michelle, in the same way, she was already painting for many, many years. She gets into Portrait Society. Richard Schmid sees it, and then she has a mentorship relationship with him that carried on for many, many years. And so an artist in the group said, you know, is this a formal, how do you get a mentor? Do you need a different mentor for the business side of art, for drawing, for painting, is it something that you make very formal, or is it just a friendship? And I gave an answer that my mentorships have been very much friendship based, and I would like to clarify that and give a little bit more. After the fact, I thought, I could have given a lot better thought to that. I have paid and been in workshops, traveled to them, gotten the hotel, gotten on the planes, taken all my equipment, paid the money to go to the workshops for almost all of the mentorship that I have received, right? Whether it's going to Portrait Society or going to these different workshops that I have been in, sometimes repeating workshops many times. You know, I've taken Michelle's several, I've taken Rob Liberace's several times. And then what has happened from doing those things and investing, you know, I'm paying them for their expertise. What has happened is then I developed the friendships.
Yep.
And by going to Portrait Society every single year and having that FaceTime and making a point, I make a point to go up to them and retouch. Not inorganically or inauthentically. I genuinely want to, but I make a point to, hello. How have you been this last year? I've been seeing your work on Facebook, you know, and to have a catch up with these artists and then have developed relationships outside of those workshops, which then have lent themselves to, I'm having a problem on a painting, I'm just going to call them. So that was something I thought I need to give a little bit more. I need to flesh that out just a little bit more, but it was a wonderful session. It was much more tiring to me personally than the face-off. It was 2 hours.
Yep.
And I finished that. I felt like I started out like a grape, juicy, you know, round, and I finished at the end of the 2 hours a raisin, like truly shriveled, happy as could be.
Happy, a crazy, maybe a chocolate covered raisin at the end of it.
Yeah, I was happy as could be, but I was so tired and I felt so depleted. And so we finished and where everyone's clapping. It was so wonderful. And I turn around and there is this whole half semicircle of people just crowded around the stage that we were on, just looking up at me with questions and things. And I literally looked out at them and in my inner heart just thought, oh no, do I have anything left to give them? And it was true. Do I have anything left? You know, because it was just, I'm a raisin. Is there literally anything that I can give you? I hope I can give you what you want. And so there were great questions in that group, and it was so wonderful to meet people. And then I went and got a very hearty meal after that, and it was incredible.
You didn't wait 2 hours plus for.
Well, I
for
actually
them.
did, because talking to all those people took an hour and a half, and then I had to break down. So it did take 2 hours to get more food, but it was sort of not my choice, but it was worth it.
And what I appreciate so much about Michelle, and I'll rewind a second because I think we've talked about on this podcast the value of seeking out a mentor. Mm-hmm. And what we focused on, though, was from the perspective of the mentee. Mm-hmm. What I'm hearing from how Michelle has been so humble, kind, and generous, giving with her time and literally her money is, let's zero in on the traits of what it constitutes a mentor who is worthwhile and good. Of course, from a skills perspective, that's very important. But as we've started to meet more and more living masters, like I think of Michelle as a great example. We've spent time with Michael Shane Neal. You've spent time with Jeff Hine. All of them are incredibly humble, right? C.W. Mundy, again, incredibly, incredibly humble. But let's view this from the perspective of the mentor for a second. As we think about you starting to shift into this role, and I think you are a mentor to a couple of artists, it's up to you now to pay it forward. And that's exactly what Michelle wants. Michelle, if you're listening, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and speak for you in this instance, but I think there's a large component of representational art that is based on tradition being passed down and legacy as well. And so for Michelle to teach you, to inspire you, and to give to you, it's now up to you to say, well, I just did a 2-hour session. I'm really beat. I'm dead tired. But you have this next generation of artists who want to ask you questions,
100%.
who want your time. You were the beneficiary of Michelle, poor Michelle with her cold dinner. It's up to you to pay it forward.
100%, because they've given that to me.
Yep.
In every workshop I ever took, I hunted them down on the lunch breaks, and they gave me the time.
Yep.
And they invited me to sit with them, and I stayed extra long just to see if they were going to drop any more nuggets before the workshop ended. Yep. And if I found out where they were going to dinner, I wouldn't stalk them. And all of them have done that. Rose Franson did that in February, and all of them, and this is really a tenet of the Portrait Society, is that it is such a giving group.
Yep.
And I've been to other groups where it's doesn't feel the same way, and it could be even cliquish or something like that, and that just has never been the vibe, so to speak, of the Portrait Society. Yep. And I distinctly remember in 2023, before we found out we were expecting our son, we had visited my friend Maddie Ree Neal and in New York City, and Michael Shane Neal. And I painted with them that weekend, and we went to the Met together. It was just a really special time. And I remember sitting in the studio at the National Arts Club one evening, and they were stretching or taking a canvas that Shane had to take back to Nashville with him. Yep. And putting it in a tube, and the fire was going, and we had just gotten pizza, and we're just conversing about different things. And at that time, I hadn't started teaching as much, and I had just started getting these very natural inquiries for mentorship, actually, basically on Instagram, from people just reaching out and saying, do you have time? Is there a way that we could get on a call? That was sort of how that whole, it was very organic. The whole, wow, there's a world out there of people that could use some help, and I have the answers for them. And it was people reaching out to me first, and I was just starting to get those inquiries, and I started to voice to Shane in March of 2023, I really just don't want to be an artist who starts teaching too soon and thinks they know more than they know and spouting it off like I'm a master. Yep. And so there was a question in there for him. Do you think that I would be ready? And what he said, I'll never forget. And it really shifted my mindset toward this, because I'd been very hesitant to be putting on a lot of workshops, to be doing a lot of things where I would be teaching, because I so desperately didn't want to be a clanging cymbal that was out of tune.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked at me and he said, you have been the recipient of so much wisdom and advice and generosity from master artists. It is actually your duty to pass it on. So if people are asking, you absolutely should take it up.
Yeah.
And it kind of gives me the chills now, because I can just picture the room and him sitting on that couch and the fire and just feeling like, is this even my real life? This is so special. And him saying that, and I have never obviously forgotten it, and I never will. And I feel that very deeply, that there has been so much generosity, and now even from people that have passed, I feel like I was so lucky to get to study with so many of these artists: Scott Burdick, Sue Lyon, Michelle Dunaway, Rose Franson, Dan Gerhardt's, all these people that were sort of in this one place and one time, studying with Richard Schmid at the Palette and Chisel, kind of keeping representational art alive. And then artists that were not in that circle, that were in other parts of the country, C.W. Mundy, Michael Malm, Johanna Harmon, Kwang Ho. There's a lot of artists out there that were doing the same thing in other parts of the country, but many of the greats today were underneath Richard. And I got to just sneak in at the very, very tail end, right? And meet him and be in the place, because I painted with the Putney Painters a couple of times over the last 10 years. And only that first time was Richard there. The second time I came back and was invited to paint with them was the first time that he didn't make it because he wasn't feeling well. And I remember being absolutely gutted by that, because well, in truth, it was the first time I went, it was a still life day. They would switch between still life and figures or portraits. And I was trash at still life at that time. So I was just disappointed I couldn't impress them, like as if my job was to impress Richard Schmid and Nancy Guzik and all the Putney Painters by going there. I very quickly learned that was the wrong mindset to have going into that. But the second time I went, it was going to be a figurative pose. And I was like, I can show them what I can do, and then he wasn't there, so that was another lesson about mindset. All of these things were lessons for me. But I just got to see what it was like just for a little bit. And so now reading Alla Prima and going to these events where these, and Reverend Raymond Kinsler, that first couple of years, I believe he passed in 2019. I can't exactly remember, but I met him multiple times and saw him speak about his career and about his paintings. And that's priceless, to have been able to just be in the room right before the door closed and a new generation came in.
Yeah. And I think you should attribute a lot of this to Michelle, right? I think all roads lead to Michelle, and they lead to the Portrait Society of America conference. Like, what a fitting way to wrap up this episode, tying it all together with a bow, to where you go and you attend this conference, you seek out the artists who you admire, whose work you are drawn to, the artists that you want to emulate, and you ask for their time, because now we're getting to this point in terms of the maturity of the conference itself. There are artists like yourself who are rising to real prominence, largely in part because of the connections that you've made at the Portrait Society conference. And now you are willing to give that back. So Michelle, as a direct beneficiary of Stephanie's painting prowess and skills, I thank you. And just your kindness has been really, really incredible to experience. Michelle has brought Nancy Guzik over here to paint in our home, which was a very special.
This painting, actually, if you can see behind
very, very, very special experience.
That's
and just Michelle is just such a breath of fresh air and such a kind human being. So we are definitely getting Michelle. I've said this many times before. She's definitely coming here, and she's going to be on a Broadcasting Brushers episode. We're going to figure that out. But what a great conference for you. I think we will likely make plans to attend together as a family every year. So Great episode, Stephanie. I'm glad that you could get this off your chest. I know that when you arrived back home on Sunday, we spoke for a couple of hours to where you gave me the download, and just a fruitful conference. So many connections made, relationships strengthened, and just an all-around great time. And everyone, we appreciate you listening in and or watching. If you're on YouTube, please go ahead and subscribe to Stephanie's YouTube channel. Check us out on Patreon as well as social. Stephanie has an Instagram. She also has a fine art website as well that is very accessible. But we appreciate you listening. We hope you got some relevant, valuable insights and learnings out of this, and stay tuned for our next episode.
Thanks.
Stephanie, you were wonderful and extremely well spoken, as you always are. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. It was really fun. If I haven't met you, the listener, yet, I hope I meet you next year at the conference.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Confident Brushstrokes podcast. If you found value in this conversation, hit subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and consider leaving a rating or review. It helps other artists discover the show. Want to connect with Stephanie? Follow her on Instagram and YouTube at Stephanie Page Thompson. If you're looking for deeper dives, tutorials, or community support, check out her Patreon, where she shares exclusive content for artists at every level. Until next time, keep painting with confidence.